Jamie might be leaving Fraser's Ridge, and if the new trailer is telling the truth, this could be the moment that changes everything for the Frasers. Because the promo for Outlander Season 8, Episode 2 didn't just show us a few emotional scenes. It showed fear, grief, and a prophecy that suddenly feels way more real than we expected. Someone might die, and Jamie himself looks like he's preparing to walk straight into danger. Now the big question is this the moment when history finally catches up to him? Or is Jamie about to change his fate once again? So, let's start with the biggest thing everyone noticed in the Outlander Season 8, Episode 2 trailer. Jamie is leaving, and the way the promo presents this moment makes it feel incredibly serious. This isn't just Jamie riding off for another mission or another battle. There's something heavier about it this time. You can see it in Claire's face, in the tension around the ridge, and in the way everyone seems worried about what's about to happen. Now, if you remember the ending of Episode 1, things were already starting to feel very dark. Those two men hanging from the tree with the letters carved into their foreheads were not just random victims. That scene felt like a warning. It showed us that danger has officially reached Fraser's Ridge again. And when something like that happens in Outlander, it's usually only the beginning. So when the new promo shows Jamie preparing to leave, it immediately raises a lot of questions. Where exactly is he going? And more importantly, why does it feel like he might not come back the same? Because the truth is, Jamie has always been the kind of man who runs toward danger, instead of away from it. If something threatens his family or his community, he won't sit back and wait. He will go out and face it himself. And this time, it looks like that decision might be connected to those violent events happening around the ridge. But here's where things get even more interesting. We now know about the prophecy surrounding Jamie's death. The history book that Brianna brought changed everything. Before that moment, Jamie's fate was something the characters didn't really think about too much. Yes, we know that war is coming, and yes, Jamie has always been in dangerous situations. But now there's actual historical evidence suggesting that Jamie Fraser is supposed to die at a certain point in history. And that kind of information can completely change the way everyone sees his actions. Suddenly, every decision Jamie makes feels more dangerous. Every time he rides away from Claire, it feels like it could be the moment when history finally catches up to him. But if you know Jamie Fraser, you also know something else. He has never been the kind of man who accepts fate easily. This is the same man who survived Culloden, who built Fraser's Ridge from nothing, and who has escaped death more times than anyone can count. So the real question becomes, is Jamie walking toward his destiny, or is he about to break history again? And this is exactly where the trailer starts to feel terrifying. Because while Jamie is preparing to leave, the ridge itself is falling into chaos. The trailer shows panic, fear, and at least one moment that looks absolutely heartbreaking. Marcelly is crying. Not just upset, but completely devastated. And when a character like Marcelly reacts like that, it usually means something truly tragic has happened. Which brings us to the theory that has been spreading among fans since the promo dropped. Fergus might be the one who dies. Now, I know that's a hard thing to even imagine. Fergus has been part of Jamie and Claire's family for so long that it almost feels impossible to picture the story without him. From the moment we first met him as a young pickpocket in Paris, Fergus slowly became more than just a companion. He became Jamie's son in every way that matters. And because of that, if something were to happen to Fergus, it wouldn't just be another death in the series. It would completely break the Fraser family. But when you look at the clues in the trailer, the theory suddenly doesn't feel so crazy anymore. Fergus has already been warned before about the things he writes and the ideas he spreads. Jamie himself told him that speaking too openly could put him in serious danger. And if there are people around the ridge who want to silence voices like Fergus, then the violent acts we saw at the end of Episode 1 might be directly connected to him. In other words, Fergus might already be a target. And if that's true, then Jamie leaving the ridge might not just be about solving a mystery. It might be about stopping something before it gets even worse. But what if he's already too late? Because the more you watch the trailer, the more it feels like Episode 2 is building toward a tragedy that the Frasers might not be able to stop. And if the prophecy about Jamie's fate is already hanging over everyone's heads, then this episode could push the story into a much darker direction than we expected. And honestly, that might only be the beginning of what the trailer is trying to warn us about. Now let's talk about that terrifying prophecy again, because the more you think about it, the more it feels like the real shadow hanging over Episode 2. Ever since Brianna brought Frank's history book to the ridge, things haven't felt the same. Before that moment, Jamie's life was full of danger. but it was the kind of danger he had faced many times before. Battles, enemies, political conflicts, those things were always part of Jamie Fraser's story. But a prophecy about his death is something completely different, because now everyone knows there might be a specific moment in history when Jamie Fraser is supposed to die. And that kind of knowledge changes everything. Claire knows it, Brianna knows it, Roger knows it, and even Jamie himself is starting to feel the weight of it. The trailer hints at this in a very subtle but powerful way. There's a moment where Jamie looks unusually serious, almost as if he's already made a decision. Not the kind of decision he usually makes during a fight or an argument, but something deeper than that. It feels like the kind of moment when someone decides to face their fate head-on. And that's what makes the title of episode 2 even more interesting. The episode is called Prophecies. That's not a random title. In Outlander, titles usually mean something very specific. And when the writers choose a word like prophecy, it suggests that the characters might finally start confronting the future that has been hinted at for so long. But here's the part that makes things even more complicated. Just because history says Jamie is supposed to die, doesn't mean it has to happen that way. We've already seen time and time again that history in Outlander is not as fixed as people think. Claire and Brianna both came from the future, and their presence alone has already changed many events. Small things have shifted, decisions have been different, and sometimes those changes create ripple effects that no one expected. So what if Jamie's fate is another one of those moments? What if the prophecy is not something that must happen, but something that can be changed? That idea becomes even more interesting when you think about the way Jamie reacts to danger. He's never been the type of man who hides or waits for someone else to solve a problem. If there's a threat, he deals with it himself. And the trailer strongly suggests that he's about to do exactly that again. Jamie leaving the Ridge could mean that he's going after the people responsible for the violent acts we saw earlier. He might be trying to protect the community before things spiral completely out of control. But if that's true, then Jamie could be walking straight into the very event that history warned them about. And that's where the tension becomes almost unbearable. Because imagine being Claire in that situation. She has already lost Jamie once before. She spent 20 years of her life believing he had died at Culloden. And now she's being told that history might take him away again. So when Jamie prepares to leave, it's not just another goodbye between husband and wife. It's something much heavier than that. It's the kind of goodbye that feels like it might be the last one. And even though the trailer doesn't show us everything, the emotions on Claire's face say more than words ever could. She knows the risk. She understands the prophecy. But at the same time, she also knows the man she married. Jamie Fraser will not stay behind while his people are in danger. Now, this is also where Fergus comes back into the story again, because if Fergus really is in trouble, then Jamie would absolutely be the first person to step in and protect him. Fergus is not just someone who lives on the Ridge, he is family, and that's exactly why the possibility of Fergus dying becomes even more tragic. Imagine Jamie leaving to stop the violence, only to discover that the person he wanted to protect has already become the victim. If that happens, it could completely change Jamie's path. Grief has always been one of the strongest forces in Outlander. When the Fraser family loses someone, the consequences are never small. Emotions explode, decisions become more reckless, and the story suddenly moves in directions no one expected. And if Fergus really does die, Jamie might blame himself for it. After all, he already warned Fergus about speaking too openly. He knew there were dangerous people around, and if those people decided to silence Fergus permanently, Jamie would carry that guilt with him forever, which could push him into something even more dangerous. Because grief can make people do things they normally wouldn't do. It can make them take risks they would never take before. And if Jamie believes he failed to protect his own family, there's no telling how far he might go to make things right. And that could be exactly what the prophecy is pointing toward. A moment when Jamie Fraser rides into danger, not because he wants to, but because he feels he has no other choice. But even with all these dark possibilities, there's still something about the trailer that suggests the story might not be as simple as it looks. Because sometimes in Outlander, the biggest tragedies are also the moments when history starts to change. But there's another detail in the trailer that people are not talking about enough. And honestly, it might be the most important clue in the entire promo. And that is the growing tension on Fraser's Ridge itself. Because the Ridge used to feel like the one place where Jamie and Claire could finally have peace. It was their home, their safe haven, the community they built together from nothing. But now, it feels like something is slowly breaking inside that community. The violent scene we saw at the end of episode 1 was already a huge warning. Two men hanging from a tree with letters carved into their foreheads is not just random cruelty. That kind of act sends a message. Someone wants the people on the ridge to feel afraid. Someone wants them to know that there are consequences for speaking out or stepping out of line. And when fear starts spreading inside a community, things can become very dangerous very quickly. The trailer hints that the Frasers might not be able to handle this crisis alone. The synopsis even mentions that after a violent tragedy, the Frasers will have to rely on their new tenants to help restore the community. Now this part is actually very interesting because we barely know anything about these new people yet. The Cunninghams have only appeared briefly so far, but even in those few moments, something about them felt a little strange. Especially Mama Cunningham. From the very first scene, she didn't exactly come across as someone you can immediately trust. There was something about the way she spoke, the way she observed everyone around her, that made it feel like she might know more than she's letting on. And in a show like Outlander, characters who seem mysterious in the beginning often end up playing very important roles later. But the real question is whether these new tenants are actually going to help the Ridge, or make things worse. Because sometimes, when outsiders arrive in a fragile community, they bring more problems than solutions. And if the Ridge is already dealing with violent threats and secret enemies, adding unfamiliar faces into the mix could make the situation even more complicated. Now imagine this happening at the same time Jamie decides to leave. The leader of the Ridge is gone. Fear is spreading among the settlers, and people they barely know are suddenly becoming part of their daily lives. That kind of situation can create tension very quickly, and that might be exactly what the story is building toward. If Fergus really becomes the victim of a violent attack, the entire community could start turning on each other. People might start asking who is responsible. Some might blame outsiders. Others might think the threat is coming from within the Ridge itself. And when suspicion starts growing, trust begins to disappear. That's when even the strongest communities can fall apart. This is also why Marcelle's reaction in the trailer feels so important. Her scream isn't just sadness. It feels like the kind of raw, uncontrollable grief that comes from losing someone you love. And if Fergus is truly the one she's mourning, that moment could become one of the most heartbreaking scenes of the entire season. Because Fergus has always been one of the most loyal and courageous characters in the story. He has faced so many hardships throughout his life, yet he never stopped believing in Jamie and Claire. He fought for them, he stood by them, and he built a family of his own on the Ridge. So losing Fergus wouldn't just hurt Marcelle, it would hurt everyone. Jamie would lose a son, Claire would lose someone she watched grow up, and the Ridge would lose one of the people who helped build it into the place it is today. But here's where the theory becomes even more chilling. What if Fergus doesn't just die because of random violence? What if his death is connected to the larger conflict that Jamie is about to ride into? Remember, Fergus has been involved in writing and spreading ideas that could be considered dangerous. In times of political tension, words can be just as threatening as weapons. If the wrong people believe Fergus is influencing others or encouraging rebellion, they might see him as someone who needs to be silenced. And if that's the case, then the violence on the Ridge might actually be part of something much bigger. Something connected to the growing unrest in the colonies. Which means Jamie leaving might not only be about protecting his family anymore, it could be the moment when he becomes involved in a conflict that is far larger than Fraser's Ridge. And that's exactly the kind of situation where prophecies about death start to feel very real. Because when history begins moving toward war, even the strongest men can become part of events they can't control. But knowing Jamie Fraser, there's still one possibility we can't ignore. What if, instead of walking toward the prophecy, Jamie is about to rewrite it? But if Jamie really is about to challenge his fate, then episode 2 might be the moment where everything finally starts moving toward the bigger story of the final season. Because the truth is, the world around Fraser's Ridge is changing very quickly. Tension is rising in the colonies, loyalties are starting to divide people, and sooner or later, Jamie Fraser was always going to be pulled into that storm. And the trailer seems to be hinting that this moment is getting very close. For a long time, Jamie tried to build a life that was separate from the political chaos around him. Fraser's Ridge was meant to be a place where families could live, farm, and raise children without constantly fearing war. But history doesn't always allow people to stay out of its path, especially not someone like Jamie. The more danger spreads around the Ridge, the more people will look to Jamie for leadership. He has always been the person others turn to when things fall apart. And if violence is now targeting the settlers, Jaime might feel like he has no choice but to step forward again. That's why the moment where Jaime prepares to leave feels so powerful. It's not just a man riding away from home. It's the leader of the Ridge stepping into a conflict that could change everything for his family. And Claire knows exactly what that means. Out of everyone, Claire understands history better than anyone else. She has seen how quickly events can spiral once larger political forces get involved. One small act can trigger something much bigger. One death can start a chain reaction that leads to war. So when she looks at Jaime in the trailer, you can almost feel the fear she's trying to hide. Because she knows the prophecy. She knows that history might already have a place waiting for Jaime Fraser. And every time he rides toward danger, that possibility becomes more real. But at the same time, Claire also knows something else. Jaime has already survived things that should have killed him many times before. Culloden should have been the end of his story. The battles, the prisons, the betrayals, any of those moments could have been his last. And yet somehow Jaime always found a way to survive. That's why the prophecy about his death feels so complicated. On one hand, history says one thing. On the other hand, Jaime Fraser has never been a man who follows the path that history expects. And that's exactly why fans are so divided about what might happen next. Some people believe the prophecy will eventually come true exactly the way it was written, that Jaime's story has always been moving toward a specific moment and nothing can stop it. But others think something very different is about to happen. They think Jaime might actually break the prophecy. And if you look closely at the trailer, there are hints that this could be possible. The fear, the tragedy, the violence on the Ridge, all of these things could push Jaime into making a decision that changes the course of events completely. If Fergus really dies, that loss alone could drive Jaime to take action in ways he normally wouldn't. Grief can change a person, and when someone like Jaime Fraser is pushed by grief, the consequences can be enormous. Instead of avoiding danger, he might confront it directly. Instead of waiting for events to unfold, he might force them to change. And if that happens, the historical timeline Claire knows might start shifting again, which would mean that the prophecy about Jaime's death is no longer guaranteed. But here's the terrifying part. Sometimes, when people try to escape fate, they end up running straight toward it. And that might be exactly what the trailer is hinting at. Jaime leaving the Ridge could be the first step toward stopping the violence threatening his people. But it could also place him directly in the path of the event that history recorded as his final moment. That's why episode 2 feels like such a crucial turning point. Because for the first time, Jaime is no longer just reacting to danger. He's moving toward it with full awareness that history might already be waiting for him. And if the prophecy really is as terrifying as it sounds, then the next decision Jaime makes could decide whether he survives the story or becomes part of the legend everyone remembers.